Welcome to another episode of The Deep Dive on Till Death Do Us Part. We are your hosts, Colin Thompson and Sophia McMullen. Okay, let's dive into today's topic, Wilcox Cemetery. So for this deep dive, you've sent over some really interesting materials about Wilcox Cemetery. It's in North Collins, Erie County, New York.
That's right.
And our goal today really is to dig into the history and the significance of this burial ground. Using the info you've provided, we're looking at where it came from, who might be buried there, and what it tells us about that local community back then.
Exactly. It's more than just a list of names. It's about trying to understand the context, the lives behind those names. What were their beliefs? How did this place fit into their world?
Okay, so the sources pinpoint the location pretty clearly. Wilcox Cemetery is at the corner of Quaker Road and Wilcox Road in North Collins.
Right.
Just south of what used to be the hamlet of Shirley. We even have coordinates, which is great for pinpointing it. 42.55839 latitude, Manica 78.91595 longitude. Puts it right on the map.
And what jumps out right away is the mention of the original log Quaker meeting house. One source says it stood immediately north of that intersection.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so the cemetery was right there on the corner next to their place of worship. That proximity, it really speaks volumes, doesn't it, about how central faith was.
It really does. That close connection between, daily spiritual life and their final resting place.
Sadly, that original log building, it burned down, destroyed by fire around 1900, according to the source.
A shame. So the original structure linked directly to the cemetery is gone.
Right. Now, there's also mention of another Quaker burial ground nearby. We need to be careful here.
Okay.
It's called the Friends Meeting House Burial Grounds, and it's on Route 62, south of North Collinstown. Different coordinates, different spot entirely.
Got it. So two distinct Quaker-related sites. Wilcox Cemetery at the intersection and the Friends Meeting House grounds on Route 62.
Precisely. And it's important we keep them straight. Now, complicating things slightly, one source, Find a Grave, actually calls Wilcox Cemetery the Shirley Orthodox Friends Cemetery.
Surely after the nearby hamlet, right? That makes sense.
Yeah, that was common practice. And Orthodox Friends likely refers to a specific branch within Quakerism at the time. Gives us a bit more historical context.
Okay, but here's where it gets really curious, based on that same source. It says there's absolutely no documentation that anyone named Wilcox belonged to that meeting or is even buried in the cemetery.
Despite the name, yeah, that's the puzzle.
It really makes you stop and think, why call it Wilcox Cemetery then?
Well, it's a great question. Could it be the landowner? Maybe a prominent local family, the Wilcoxes, gave the land even if they weren't part of that specific meeting.
That's plausible. Or maybe it's just a local name that stuck, and the original reason is lost because, the records aren't there.
That lack of record seems to be a key theme. This name discrepancy is definitely something to keep in mind as we go.
So let's talk about the condition of Wilcox Cemetery now. The sources say it's pretty overgrown.
Yes, sadly that's often the case with older, less active cemeteries. Nature tends to reclaim them, doesn't it?
It does. But even so, there are still traces. A few headstones are apparently still legible.
Which is something. Silent reminders. But many others have weathered so badly you can't read them anymore. It really underscores how fragile these physical links to the past are.
And there's specific mention of shale headstones. Shale's quite soft, isn't it?
Very. So it's not surprising they degrade. One is supposedly still partly readable, which is remarkable in itself. Makes you wonder what stories were carved on the ones now worn smooth.
Exactly. And perhaps most crucially, the North Collins Historical Society apparently stated back in July 2000 that the cemetery hadn't been cataloged.
And no known records existed at that time.
Right. No official lists, no plot map, nothing. That makes figuring out who's actually buried there incredibly difficult. We're relying on the stones themselves and whatever local memory might survive.
It's a real challenge, that lack of formal records. It might suggest something about how things were run back then. Maybe less centralized, more community-based compared to later practices. Or maybe records just got lost to fire, flood, or time.
But even without a full list, the sources do mention some specific names tied to Wilcox Cemetery. Revolutionary War soldiers, interestingly enough.
Yes, 3 of them. John Caston died 1843. David Corbin lived roughly 1757 to 1846. And a John Stancliffe listed as 85 in the 1840 census.
Burying Revolutionary War soldiers in a Quaker cemetery. It seems unusual.
It is. The Find a Grave source notes this too. Quakers were generally conscientious objectors. Serving in the military wasn't common, though not completely unheard of.
They might support the cause in non-violent ways, right?
Right.
Supplies, aid.
Exactly. So finding veterans buried there, seemingly with their service acknowledged, is significant. It suggests perhaps some complexity or flexibility within that community, or maybe individual choices that went against the grain.
Or maybe attitudes shifted over the decades between the war and their deaths. It's fascinating. And those dates, 1843, 1846, gives us a sense of lifespan for that generation too.
It does. Now, just to be absolutely clear, that other cemetery we mentioned.
The Friends Meeting House Burial Grounds on Route 62.
Yes, that one. The sources indicate it has much more extensive records. A stark contrast.
So?
Well, there's a long list of names, often with birth and death dates, and even specific burial locations noted, like Quaker Section R, Lot 1.
Wow, okay. So that suggests a much more organized, systematic approach to record keeping there.
Definitely. It makes you wonder why the difference. Were they established at different times? Did they serve slightly different functions? Or did record keeping just become more formalized later on?
That list of names for the Route 62 cemetery is really extensive in the source material.
It is. It paints a picture of a very well-documented community resting place. The sheer number of families represented, let me just give you a sense of it. It lists surnames like, pauses slightly, Burke, Stickney, Tucker, Taylor, Judson, Flogus, Cook, Garley, Robinson, Bonafide, Geiger, Barr, Pickens, Randall, Hand, Hurd, Estes, Martindale, Steadwell, Ported, Garley again, Oliver, Tabor, Peck, Conrad, Carr, Willett, Sisson, Turnbull, Kimball, Pratt, Thorne, Chapin, Hussey, Brown, Wilson, Wing, Merchant, Wilcox. Wilcox there. Interestingly enough, Bartow, Wood, Taft, Carozzi, Saith, Eichbacher, Ehring, Drake, Aller, Sherman, Higgin, Milnes, Athway, Oakes, Dudley, Briggs, Mitchell, Rogers, Spaeth, Davis, Smith, Tucker again, Heim, Allen, Farnham, Stricklawn, maybe Swan, Artie, Russell, Taylor, Bacon, Bardo, Yoshim, Kimball again, Long, Hathaway again, Wormuth, Wilson, Stocker, Palmer, Herbert, Orton, Southwick, McMillan, Varney, Rice, Hadley, Bailey, Gurney, Reinbold, Goodrich, Potter, Martin, Kirby, Powers, Austin, Sabo, Shepard, Bosenberg, Ashby, Dudley, Conger, Kerr, Minikheim, Cam, Akeley, Botco, Coonley, Hart, Metzer, Southwick, Tabor, McMillan, Spire, Lindo, Congdon, Vanderpool, Twining, Coca, Ortman, Wilson again, Hug, Franklin, Knapp, Crawford, Graham, Schofflin, Fleming, Charles, Chazelle, Brown, Shefflin, Hunt, Orton again, Schneider. Pauses.
Yeah.
Quite a list.
That really drives home the difference in documentation, doesn't it? A massive difference compared to Wilcox Cemetery.
Absolutely. But even for Wilcox, it's worth noting that Find a Grave does list 80 memorials.
Oh, really? So people are trying to piece it together.
Seems so. Community effort, probably driven by genealogists and local historians. Many have photos, some even GPS coordinates. It shows that desire to remember, even without official papers.
That's good to hear. So both these sites, Wilcox and the Friends Meeting House grounds, they're tangible links to the early Quaker settlers in North Collins.
Undeniably, they highlight the importance of the Religious Society of Friends in shaping that area. Their very presence speaks volumes.
And that image of the original meeting house right next to Wilcox Cemetery, it just reinforces how central faith must have been, not just on Sunday, but woven into the fabric of life and death.
And how they understood remembrance, perhaps. It wasn't just about marking a spot, but about community and ongoing connection.
Then there's the broader context you mentioned
Yeah.
from the Town of Collins Cemeteries document.
Right. It reminds us that these two Quaker sites are part of a whole network of burial grounds in the town. Some active, some abandoned, some with lost martyrs.
It paints a bigger picture. Wilcox and the Friends grounds are just two pieces of a much larger historical puzzle spread across the landscape.
And it highlights the fragility of it all. How easily history can be overgrown or forgotten if efforts aren't made to preserve and document these places.
So, wrapping up our look at Wilcox Cemetery and the related Quaker sites, it's really been a fascinating glimpse into early North Collins.
It has. We've seen the deep connection to Quaker faith, the intriguing questions raised by the lack of records at Wilcox compared to the other site.
And that mystery about the Wilcox name itself. Plus, the unexpected element of the Revolutionary War soldiers.
It all points to the complexities of local history. Things aren't always neat and tidy. Records get lost, names stick for unknown reasons, communities evolve.
The contrast between the overgrown, poorly documented Wilcox Cemetery and the organized, recorded Friends Meeting House burial grounds really tells a story in itself, doesn't it? About time, memory, and maybe changing priorities.
Absolutely. This whole exploration just reaffirms how important these seemingly quiet places are. Cemeteries aren't just repositories of the dead, they're repositories of stories, community history, and identity. They help us understand who came before us and how our communities were formed.
A powerful reminder of the value of local history and preservation efforts. If you like what you heard today and would like to showcase your business as an official sponsor of our show, email our producer at tilldeathdoUsPartDocs@gmail.com.